Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Fluctus Channel. Far below the roar of catapults and fighter jet engines on an aircraft carrier flight deck, another system works with relentless precision. The ship's food network. On a warship carrying around 5,000 personnel at any given time, feeding the crew is not merely a background chore. It is a mission-critical process tied directly to morale, endurance, and overall mission outcomes. Every meal served below deck helps sustain the sailors who power one of the most complex combat platforms ever built. That is what makes the carrier galley so important. Aircraft carriers may be remembered for launching jets and projecting power. But for the crew living inside them, daily life depends just as much on the mess decks, storage rooms, wardrooms, bake shops, serving lines, and sculleries. A ship this large offers better living conditions than many smaller warships because it has the volume to support more services. But that scale also creates its own burden. Thousands of sailors work different shifts, stand watch at different hours, and move between maintenance spaces, the flight deck, engineering compartments, and command centers around the clock. The kitchen, therefore, cannot think like an ordinary cafeteria. It has to function like a non-stop industrial system inside a moving military city. Before any sailor lifts a tray, the work begins with heavy but very strict logistics. Carrier crews have to estimate how much food will be needed for weeks at sea, how fast stocks will be consumed, and how menus can be adjusted around storage life, nutrition, and operational tempo. The quantities involved are staggering. A deployed aircraft carrier can serve more than 15,000 meals a day. When accounting for breakfast, lunch, dinner, mid-rats, and snacks. Over a month, that can translate into tens of thousands of pounds of meat, veggies, dairy, bread, frozen goods, and dry stores. The galley is not feeding a crew in the casual sense. It is sustaining a small town sealed inside a steel fortress crossing the ocean. That is why holiday meals matter so much. Christmas and Thanksgiving at sea are not simply themed lunches. They are morale events. In the middle of deployment, after weeks of machinery noise and exhausting duty cycles, a decorated serving line, carved turkey, or extra dessert can give sailors a rare sense of familiarity. These moments soften the hard edges of shipboard life. They remind the crew that even inside one of the most powerful warships on Earth, comfort and tradition still have value, especially during long months far from home. However, none of that happens unless the ship is stocked first. When an aircraft carrier reaches port, one of the biggest jobs begins almost immediately. Loading tons of assorted foods into the floating city. Crates of vegetables, frozen meat, milk, bottled drinks, paper goods, baking supplies, canned items, and cleaning materials all have to be brought aboard, counted, checked, and distributed into controlled storage spaces. The process is massive, urgent, and organized because the carrier burns through supplies at a tremendous rate. Once those stores are aboard, the galley can begin turning supply into sustenance. sailors move through the eating areas in waves, grabbing food quickly between watches, maintenance periods, and flight operations. Lines have to move fast, choices have to be clear, and meals have to be ready when entire groups arrive at once. That is how the carrier kitchen becomes part of the ship's wider warfighting rhythm. Below deck, food is not just cooked. It is timed, staged, and delivered to support a vessel that never stops moving for its exhausted crew below deck. After the mess decks, serving lines, and giant meal cycles are established, the next layer of life aboard the carrier comes into view. Feeding thousands of sailors is not only about placing hot food onto trays, it is also about preserving morale during long deployments, and that is where the smaller comforts begin to matter. One of the most recognizable examples is the presence of Starbucks-style coffee service at sea. In a setting dominated by alarms, maintenance schedules, and flight operations, a familiar cup of coffee can become a surprisingly important ritual. It gives sailors a short pause before watch, a breath after a hard shift, and a taste of routine in an environment where routine is often broken by operational demands. That same feeling carries into the ship store, which works like a miniature grocery stop inside the carrier. Sailors move through narrow aisles lined with snacks, drinks, hygiene items, and small personal comforts that would barely register on land. But at sea, where almost every hour is structured and most choices are limited, those little purchases take on real meaning. A cold drink after a punishing day, a favorite snack before a night watch, or a small supply of personal items can make deployment feel slightly more manageable. The ship's store may be small, but it gives the crew one of the few spaces on board that still feels connected to ordinary life. Behind that convenience lies another massive support effort: resupply. Aircraft carriers consume enormous quantities of food, beverages, and daily necessities. So receiving provisions is a constant logistical priority. Pallets of frozen meat, fresh produce, dairy products, canned goods, bottled drinks, baking ingredients, and packaged items are transferred aboard, sorted quickly, and moved into cold storage, dry storage, and preparation areas. When replenishment takes place at sea, the scale becomes even more impressive, because the floating city is being sustained without slowing down. By the time a sailor reaches for coffee, buys a snack, or steps back into the mess decks, that entire hidden chain has already done its work, turning supply into routine and routine into endurance. In that sense, the carrier no longer feels like a ship that merely contains a kitchen. It feels like an industrial town whose people, schedules, comforts, and readiness all depend on food moving through an invisible network below deck, every hour, every day, without interruption, beneath the surface. Away from the warship, out into the civilian maritime world, the same basic challenge appears in a slightly different form. Those civilian vessels will hardly stay in the ocean as long as aircraft carriers. They also need carefully managed food systems. Because once a ship leaves port, everything the people on board will eat has to be planned, loaded, protected, and used efficiently. Supplies are delivered in structured streams, refrigerated goods, frozen products, fresh produce, beverages, dry stores, and packaged items all move from dockside handling areas into storerooms, coolers, and galley spaces. The process may look routine from the pier, but it supports entire populations living at sea, with very limited room for waste or delay. That challenge becomes especially visible on cruise ships, where cooking happens on a vast scale. These vessels operate like floating hotels, and their kitchens must feed both passengers and crew throughout the day. Massive prep areas, commercial ovens, storage rooms, serving counters, and specialized workstations are organized to keep meals moving smoothly from raw ingredients to finished plates. Timing matters just as much as it does anywhere else at sea, because breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and late service all have to appear in rhythm with the schedule of the ship. But the purpose here is different. The food is not only meant to sustain people, it is also meant to shape the travel experience itself. Once meals leave the kitchen, another hidden army takes over. The galley stewards. They handle an endless return flow of plates, glasses, cutlery, trays, cookware, and serving tools, all of which must be scraped, washed, sanitized, sorted, and sent back into use. Passengers may only see polished dining rooms and full buffet lines, but behind that polished surface is a non-stop reset cycle driven by speed, discipline, and repetition. Looking at civilian ships this way makes one thing very clear. Life at sea, no matter the purpose of the vessel, always depends on a food operation far larger, more technical, and more relentless than most people ever imagine. Even luxury depends on logistics. Behind every plated meal, dessert station, and stocked dining room stands a chain of loaders, storekeepers, cooks, and cleaners working in sequence so that service never visibly breaks. The smoother the passenger experience appears, the more invisible effort is usually being spent below deck, where preparation, storage discipline, and constant dish recovery keep the entire hospitality machine alive at sea daily. That same dependence on food, routine, and morale continues even farther offshore on oil rigs. These platforms are not ships in the traditional sense, but they create a similar kind of isolated industrial life. Workers are surrounded by machinery, steel, weather, noise, and long shifts, often far from shore for extended periods. In that setting, food becomes far more than simple nourishment. Meals help break the day into manageable pieces. They provide comfort, familiarity, and a shared pause inside an environment built around pressure, risk, and repetition. Life on an oil rig is demanding in its own way. Crews work hard, sleep in compact quarters, and repeat the same exhausting rhythms day after day. Because of that, the dining area becomes one of the few spaces where the intensity briefly eases. Hot meals, stocked counters, and predictable meal hours help steady morale and give people something to look forward to between shifts. The kitchen, in effect, becomes one of the rig's most important support systems. Taken together, these environments reveal the same truth. Whether at sea on a civilian vessel, far offshore on an oil platform, or inside a giant American warship, food is never just food. It is logistics, structure, comfort, and endurance combined. The aircraft carrier may be the most demanding example because of its scale and tempo, but the principle remains constant everywhere. When large groups of people live and work in isolation, the unseen system feeding them becomes one of the most important engines of all. Without that system, fatigue feels heavier, routines become harder to sustain, and the wider operation loses stability. That's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of our new content. See you next time.